Hello everybody. Hi. I am going to make a quick video to try to get the ball rolling on a certain subject that I'm really interested in. And I'm going to basically see if we can get a conversation going. The topic is, does the usage of guns ever, or can using a gun ever bring up a feeling of cowardice in somebody? Or can using weapons and guns stimulate cowardice in a human being? That's the question. I'm wanting to make a discussion about this because I feel that as a society, at least in the West, we're losing wisdom. We are becoming more unable to really talk about ourselves, in the sense of knowing ourselves, knowing the human being, the human brain. We are faced with such a question, and immediately we resort to what we're supposed to say about that question. And it's because we have been increasingly getting educated through ideologies, through ideas, through moral judgments. We teach people to feel and think about a certain way if they do or if they say certain things. Um, and we have departed, at least in my estimation, in my lifespan, from just having the conversation in society of things that are grounded in actual human sciences, knowing that the brain can experience, for example, cowardice at the moment it is about to decide shooting a gun against somebody. And anyway, so that's basically the question. And the reason I want to probe into these kinds of intense um, debates is because I feel that I made a post, I made a picture with a writing on my page, on my web page, not on my web page, on my Facebook page, that basically says we design our civilization and institutions, our systems, our intelligent civilization, our logical, analytical intelligent civilization, by our design, by our invention, around an organism, a collective social organism, which is the human being, the human species. And I put a picture of a globe with a grid on it, and the writing basically said, wherever you pull on one place, it will affect somewhere else in the world. So, for example, if we are a civilization that, let's say, for example, we no longer um, we no longer have physical encounters between men and act up physically and brawl and fight, when we get excessively frustrated or angry, which is something that has always been with human beings, with humanity for all of history, because we train ourselves to not to. Could it be the result of thinking more in terms of resolving problems with artifacts? In other words, we quash ourselves, we silence ourselves when we witness intense injustice being committed against somebody, because we assume the system, the judicial system, the armed police will take care of it somewhere at some time, and we have become more passive and uninvolved. And and I wonder if that could be described as a form of cowardice, because if we see a mugger rip a purse from an old lady on the street, many of us today, unfortunately, will just freeze on our tracks and be afraid of confrontation, of going up to chasing that robber. And I think this is a characteristic that has grown compared to maybe the world 100 years ago, where maybe most men were raised a little bit more with the stronger hand of the father or the uncles or the men in their society, and therefore had a closer connection to values of dignity, of honor, of the right to defend justice, or the right to act publicly before injustice. And these sorts of things have increasingly been diffused through in modern society. And at the same time, we have become more gadget violent. You know, the police have tasers and guns and handcuffs, and they can throw you behind bars. And so the instead of society resolving things with our physical uh, body, which is in unison with our verbal, our speaking, and our reasoning. In other words, the punch flies because at that moment you understand something regarding what was said. It all happens as one move. And that perhaps has, throughout the history of mankind, regulated, proportioned, kept things somehow stable. Where now it's very easy to just pick up a gun and squeeze a trigger. And so, or say, well, you know, the law and the state granted me immunity if I screw up and I kill you accidentally, says a police officer, or if I arrest the wrong person, I'm okay. I don't have to fear that. So they're more willing to act violently through the gadget, through the gun. And all these things are happening and changing and transforming the way we have acted for the majority of our civilization's history. And I think it really behooves us to go back to being intelligent about the human sciences and ask ourselves, where does perhaps one kind of way of living or belief in this grid that covers the globe affect us, to where it's somewhere else it allows us to be more a certain other way, or impoverishes us in another area. Because it's not just about judgment. It's not about judging and punishing and condemning others for their actions. It's really about understanding. We need to understand what is going on with us, what happens to our collective social intelligence, our brain as a species, as a population over the world. We need to understand how we're being affected by our own actions, more importantly than blaming and punishing people that don't conform to the latest way of thinking ideologically or politically. We need to understand how we're fundamentally made, what we look for, and what our own invention is causing us to become more of or to be less of, this is because this is what is really important. It's not important to control and dominate our behavior. It is important to understand what we will do because of other actions, because of other influences and suggestions at the hands of our own inventions, the invention of our civilization. So I want to start this, oh my God, I think this is going to be the shortest video I ever made. I want to start this conversation. Have you ever used a gun? Have you ever, I'm not, if you're a police officer, it would be harder. I'm talking about the average person, the person that kind of shies away and rather not have to deal with guns, and perhaps at some point in your childhood, an uncle or whoever wanted to teach you how to use a gun. And I remember this happened to me once. My mother had some friend in the military stay with us, and he wanted to be like an uncle. He was a good guy, a friend of my parents, and we went out into we had a big yard with a pool and some open space, and I'm going to teach this lad how to use a gun, right? And he had a real gun, a small gun. I don't remember it. I kind of remember a BB gun, but it wasn't a BB gun. It was a real gun. And he wanted me to feel the force, the impact on my hand, and how difficult it is in actuality to be firm about hitting the target. And I remember those feelings. And then, but I mean, that's not what gave me I think life has educated me and vicariously being able to understand when somebody reacts. And so, for example, if somebody were to bully me, um, and I would feel the coward because I'm not really a fighting person. I kind of, I'm kind of afraid of fighting, to be honest. I will react. I won't. I'm not a coward in the sense that I will run like a chicken. I actually am like a hidden hero in this cowardly person. If I get challenged, something wakes up in me, and all of a sudden I'm like super aggressive. And where other people, some guys that you would think, oh, that's a man's man, he will fight, he will protect himself, may actually try to run or not want to fight somebody. I wake up this part in me that I don't know why it's being, but in all, my overall behavior is not that. It's somebody who rather use their brain. So if something really egregious happened to me where somebody attacked me, my animal, or my family or friends that were with me or something, and I was challenged, and the guy was very big and maybe had some friends, and I was really challenged before my own fear, cowardice, fear, it's the same thing, really challenged. And all of a sudden I saw there was a gun at reach, I could grab immediately. Um, I'm able to know what that would feel like, almost in an acting vicarious sense. I know that in the way I am, I would feel that I am being cowardly because I'm not actually doing what would seem more practical or more sincere, which is using my body to confront spontaneously that person. Instead, I'm using my logic and using the gun. And when I started thinking these types of things, these kinds of scenarios some years ago, I started wondering if this doesn't happen perhaps to everybody, because we evolved using our body to confront challenging situations that required us being defending, required us to be defensive of others or of ourselves. And this has constituted the majority of our evolutionary course. 99, guns were only invented like the last hour of human evolution, let's say, in a year or something. Those scales where they say it's only the last 10 minutes that we've been driving cars, when for the last 10 years we've been walking. Well, one of those things. That's what I mean by the majority of our evolutionary course. And so that means that in our brain, all the dynamics and all that have to do with calling up your bravery, or resorting to your fear, being cowardly about something, or being challenged and not being cowardly, and that whole part, that area of the brain that we all share, is pretty much fixed by evolution and very similar. At some place, it is very similar in all of us, and then it gets modulated through personality, genetically, but mainly the way we're raised, the way we raised as children, and by society and culture. And so then we will end up expressing that part of us very differently, one person to the other. But before the influences of family, parents, society, culture, we have a very similar starting sort of configuration in that area of the brain. And so looking at that, not looking at each individual person, how they end up being very different to one another, but looking at how we are as the general model, the general design of the human being. What happens to our brain when we want something, or we feel that I could have something, or I decide that something is unfair and I should not have let myself have that taken from me, and I want justice. And instead of doing what the physiology of evolution has given us, which is to go back to that person, to talk to them, to act more forceful or more assertive, and take on a stance and try to, repair that which we regret what happened wrongly. Instead, we resort to this invention, the gun. And so now we're talking about the use of a gun by anybody for whatever reason, based on this original configuration. I mean, general configuration that we all share fairly equally. What happens at that moment? And I think you don't really need to be a scientist to to meditate or go back, reference experiences or things that you have seen in life to know, to be able to say, yeah, I know that instant in which you feel I'm going to take advantage of that, and you kind of have to think over it feels cowardly because I can kill somebody without them being able to defend themselves, basically. I can go up to them behind their back and shoot them in the head, and I get what I want, and I got my justice done, or I robbed whatever I wanted, or, that instant in which that the gun makes possible as an invention, as the definition of this invention, must suscitate, I always say in English, but I don't think it exists, bring up or provoke a feeling of cowardice that we quickly digest, we quickly process over and suppress and say, well, there are reasons why I invented this artifact and I'm going to use it, and like so many things, we go over so many actions, so many behaviors, stealing something perhaps at a market, or not walking away. You realize you didn't pay something, and there's a moment that you catch yourself not necessarily premeditating, but you have the opportunity to steal something because the person at the market got distracted, and you catch yourself in the act of stealing. And at that very moment, there are things that happen to our brain's natural psychology, guilt, compassion, maybe, that you have a moment where you think, oh, that person's working so hard, and here I am taking their stuff. And there's a lot of things that happen equally or fairly equally to all of us because of this fundamental design that we all have created by evolution. And those conversations, they're not really had so much anymore in our intelligent cultures these days. We have lost, like maybe 50 years ago, people were studying psychology and they studied all these things, and then they brought those conversations to the bar, to dinner with the family, to a reunion, to a political gathering. No, now when you go to a political gathering or a discussion at the family table, you're talking about, we sound more like we're telling each other what we're supposed to think and what your behavior actually means and what that categorizes you or what that makes you. The intelligence upon human science intelligence, it sounds sophisticated, but it's actually something that we did a lot more only 50 or 60 years ago. We handled, for example, the subject of homosexuality. It was something that people talked about. There was debate, it's your fault because you always treated him like a baby, and so now, he always resorts to his sisters, or, and then somebody who says, no, it is believed that it comes from before, even before pregnancy, and some people say, no, it develops in pregnancy. And so these are conversations that were had not that long ago, and now we have forged a society to handle our own design, our own selves, through ideas that we're supposed to believe about us. We've become dumber, in other words, regarding how our brain actually reacts and works and understands the core truth of how our human design works. So that's the topic. I hope that somebody's interested and we can get the ball rolling. Do you believe that a society that is steeped in the usage of guns and everything gets resolved through armed force, and it starts becoming the thinking, of the hero that can kick ass, and the police, that's the hero that always, the guns win, the gun wins, the stronger country wins, the more advanced spying technology vanquishes, this thing, the artifact, the invention of or a society that believes a gun, it needs to be a daily part of existence. Like you should be able to carry it around town, like in the far west. Everybody should be able to carry a gun. I mean, the world has gone through periods like that. It didn't only happen in the American far west, but if not maybe the majority of recent modern history. But the question is, do you believe that perhaps stealing us, robbing from us the natural engagement of confrontation, which is, like I said, the combination of adamant affirmation with our body in our verbal in a verbal capacity that may lead to us engaging in a physical fight, but which is all tied together with our personality, with our language, with our interaction with others, with the collective being much more action reaction with one another, meaning, you go and solve a situation, good or bad, it doesn't matter. The act of force before something that you don't want to see happen, or you want to see happen, and there's an instant. It's not a given. You may be very assertive. You may say, I'm going to fight this person, or I'm going to let them know how I think. And then it turns out that they have a really strong argument, or that their friends join in and say and prove to you, or shore up this person's strength. However it happens, it involves a whole bunch of social collective dynamics that are all about how we interact socially. And with the instrument, with the invention of the gun, we don't have to no longer go by talking to one another. This is kind of ironic, right? Countries, rather than resolve disputes, resort to armies. We no longer try to understand what the other one is saying. Maybe they may be hiding something they know about me, or perhaps I will then really be able to demonstrate that I'm right, or whatever the verbal interaction is. And this, again, this is analogous to diplomacy, getting, or simply not diplomacy perhaps so much as getting to really honestly know another culture, another people, and what matters with their equalities, what matters to that country insofar as their equalities to our own society. All those things get pushed aside when we just put our will on our military and say, we're going to make this happen. Who cares who's living there, or what they do, or what they say? We find the analogies in a one-to-one social situation. But in any case, the question is, do you believe that perhaps this getting used to this detachment and resorting to an invention, an inert, hard invention that will just exercise our will without the complexity of social engagement, which involves speaking and hearing one another, could possibly foster cowardice to develop more in a society, because we have to become, in other words, we allow ourselves to become weaker because we no longer have to come up with the strength, the courage to go face somebody and hold our ground, even if it's only verbally. We learn to no longer need to do that. We become passive, and we put all our resolutions into the power of a weapon. And does this not perhaps, over time and generations, start making us into a more cowardly and fearful society, and individuals like me, for example, which I would just think so much and would always be afraid of anybody wanting to fight with me, even though I confess that I have this secret weird side that all of a sudden becomes violent if I'm really put in a corner. But I'm a typical result of this. I'm not like some guy brought up in a very classical, traditional country, perhaps wherever in the Middle East or something, who had a strong relationship with his father. And immediately when they're, even Argentina or even in the States, men that grow up very bonded to their father, and, like a lot of African Americans, and this is about to take me to another subject, have no problem in standing their ground physically with their fists when they're 14 years old, and protecting their dignity, and understanding the values and the hierarchy of self-respect, and that others owe you, just like you owe them respect, honor, dignity, and all these things, are becoming impoverished, along with perhaps a development of cowardice in society. And I'm not going to go into this topic, but I'm quickly going to say that I kind of understand what is happening in the States with Americans of African descendants, because, as a culture, as a segment, as a part, a population of our culture, as an American, I know that Americans of African descendants tend to immediately recognize, they have like a radar when they're being insulted or offended or demeaned in any way. They're like trigger sensitive to that, and rightly so. I mean, I don't want to get into that and why has come to that. It developed, or however we want to talk about it. But the police, being the way American police are, that they walk around like thinking they can laugh. They laugh at how you're afraid of them, basically. Interact with this. It's like powder. It's like a powder cake. It's like a match to gunpowder, because the American police are socially not wise enough to realize I need to be a little more respectful with African Americans, because they in particular have a thing where they immediately react to being insulted, offended, treated like they're not worthy of being trusted, and this sort of thing. We never had that intelligence. They just act up even worse, because they react to African Americans feeling having a natural pride about something that we as Westerners, including many African Americans, have been sort of tamed, lost, have been configured to behave a certain way. It's an interesting phenomenon, and I think this explains better the situation than saying it's about racism. I don't think, I didn't want to get into that, but I did want to share this insight. And I think it's important that we start thinking of it that way, that the police cause and provoke because of the way they are, because of their, so typically, I've been at the station a bunch of times. I know how they look at themselves, how they react. They try to act, still and stuff, but they can't hide it. They eventually, sometimes they break. They laugh at how somebody is pleading for help, and they just think it's. There's some videos out there that just makes you just so furiously sad. I don't know that, but anyways, they have this characteristic trait in general, and some, and it's very, very spread out, and almost all of them. And that and while it separates perhaps the ones that don't care that it shows, and those that really try to act proper and seem to be more respectful, but in general, there's this problem, I feel, in the way police manifest their personalities through their job in treating the American citizen. You go to other countries and you just see every single police in every other country be whatever degree more respectful, more modest, more reserved, less triggery, less reactive, less provocative, more humble. It's just a fact. If you traveled around the world, you can say this. And so there is a problem that they're not looking at. And I think it is better to understand it this way, and understand that this part of our culture, of our Black American culture, or African American culture, because of all the history and all the things that they have to grow up reminding themselves they had to live through, raises people to be very strong and proud, and sort of they have this part of like that I lack, that I was just making fun of, that I kind of I look like somebody that's easy to push over, because I look like I would not defend myself physically if somebody was abusive verbally to me, right? And they're strong in that, and it has to do with pride that was cultivated, and I know this. I grew up in LA. Okay. I know exactly what it, and I've come to understand what it's about. And it's so they're right in feeling that way. It is a compensation, a necessary compensation that was been acquired culturally by the population, the African American population in general, which when they interact with this other very particular condition in the personality of our police, create the situations that they have been creating these past few years, and they continue to create them because we're talking about it wrongly. We're not, we've, like I said in the beginning of this video, we've lost intelligence in handling and wielding these human sciences and topics that before, that would describe how people normally would react. And mind you that in places where some of this pride has been preserved, they're closer to that. But anyways, it's a mess. Everybody's just thinking their own thing, and so I don't think racism is a huge thing. I think we have made it worse by turning it into a civil issue. I think when people are angry, they will resort to the first stick they can pick up. We first see the human being. When I see somebody from Africa or from China or from wherever, I'm seeing another human being, and we all are seeing another human being first. Then comes whatever culture and society has taught me to continue thinking, or a natural thing that may come if there are disgruntled offenses or things, voids of not knowing each other and just disliking or having prejudices. And we'll say, oh, but he's a dumb fatso, for example. Why do people do that? Why can't he just say he's not that intelligent or he's pretty stupid? He has to add dumb fatso. Because we try to hurt people when we're angry and frustrated. I could go on expanding about this, but I'm just going to take one of my usual tangents. And so that's what really using racial slurs is about. It's not about an element that exists in our psyche that needs to be educated and suppressed, called racism. No, we invented the social subject. We made it a thing. I mean, people have always noticed what skin color you have. That's not going to go anywhere. And unfortunately, we have, when everything is dandy and all the Brazilians dance their carnival together, they'll say, "Hey, you beautiful black, come over here, dance with me. Oh, look at those beautiful chocolate breasts, Love, love, love. Nobody sees a problem, okay? And the problem comes for any human being when instead of being homogeneous as a culture, but we created this constant ongoing conversation of having to think about that, having to think is black, white, black, white, black, white, and we don't give ourselves peace because we are neurotically obsessed with resolving something that does not necessarily need to be a problem. It has more to do with how we treat each other and what kind of love and sentiment there is in our culture, and how our civil intelligence thinks about one another. If we are a civil intelligence that has never really made an issue of the races of the world, we wouldn't be always, but America does the opposite. America creates forms with little boxes where if you go ask for Social Security and you never even thought of wow, I have 15 black friends and I didn't even realize, until the moment I checked that box if I'm Latino or Hispanic or Pacific Islander, and you see the box that says black, and then you go, oh wow, I have 20 black friends. And my life was so much better before I saw that form at the Social Security office. This is what I'm trying to say. So I didn't want to go there. I'm more interested in us realizing what the real problem is with the police and the citizenship, and why the African Americans are getting the brunt of it. And I had to explain also that about racism so that we can see the difference. And this video was about having the conversation regarding the influence of guns and having steel power over another human being may foster cowardice in the long run, in the long span of the whole of civilization and individuals, perhaps in different forms, different quickly unperceived instances, or however you may have experienced what I'm talking about. It'd be great to get this conversation going. Okay, thanks. Ciao.